This was the week where South African Anglican Archbishop, Nobel laureate, and leader in the anti-apartheid movement of the 70s and 80s, Desmond Tutu died at the age of 90. He consistently called for justice in South Africa, but also nonviolence. And when the apartheid regime did finally fall, he was appointed by President Nelson Mandela, to lead the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, saying that a wound can't heal unless it is cleaned. And that was the idea of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, was to actually look back at the crimes of the apartheid regime and also come to terms with them and heal from them. Here he is just sort of explaining his role in the anti-apartheid movement, what it was like then, and what it was like under apartheid itself. And forgive the music on top of this. I didn't do it, and I didn't know how to remove it.
You had these separate exits, but then you went onto the same street, and you breathed the same air, and it was crazy. But a lot of it was humiliating. Very many good things have happened. I mean, one is we're free. It was quite unbelievable how quickly it happened. I mean, it was, as they sometimes say, like greased lightning. I mean, one day Nelson Mandela is in jail, the next he is out. Then you have negotiations, and hey presto, we have a democracy.
But I and the ANC are as opposed to black domination as we are to white domination.
Imagine if we had chosen the path of retribution and revenge. Our country would have been dust and ashes now. When you nurse a grudge, your blood pressure shoots up and you feel it in your tum-tum. Whereas when you forgive, your blood pressure goes down, and you have a physical well-being that reflects your spiritual well-being. So that you can say forgiving is good for your health.
You feel it in your tum-tum.
So
and grease lightning.
Grease lightning, presto. I mean, that's the other thing about Desmond Tutu. I've seen him speak a few times. I think once in New York in person, and like his humor is so apparent, and his like infectious laugh and his smile. It's like he's always smiling. You're like,
yeah.
This was someone who fought against apartheid and saw the ugliest side lived in it, saw the ugliest side of humanity. And has that
sense of humor and that sensibility. Yeah. No, he was a sweet man who was against apartheid everywhere, which I think made him very special, in my opinion.
Yeah, he spoke out up until even recently. He talked about like vaccine apartheid under COVID. He was talking about climate change. He's got this great quote where he's like speaking to a bunch of students in Copenhagen, and he's like, if we don't do something about climate change, woo boy. Like, so hilarious. He also spoke out against the Iraq War, which is, I believe, around the time I saw him. And I was like, oh my God, there's like a living legend. Like, holy shit, he's done so much in his life. And he did a number of things against the war. He refused to share a stage with Tony Blair. He spoke out at the large anti-war demo on February 15th in New York. And as recently as 2012, he was saying things like this: Blair should face trial for the Iraq War.
Yeah.
Which is like insane. And I wanted to read more about Tutu and what his comments then. He's like, those responsible for this suffering and loss of life should be treading the same path as some of their African and Asian peers who have been made to answer for their actions in The Hague, sort of calling out that, like, the racism embedded in, if you're a warmonger from the West, you get off.
Yeah. And the hypocrisy and racism in the International Criminal Court.
Yeah. He says leadership and morality are indivisible. Good leaders are the custodians of morality. The question isn't whether Saddam Hussein was good or bad or how many of his people he massacred. The point is that Bush and Blair should not have allowed themselves to stoop to his immoral level. If it is acceptable for leaders to take drastic action on the basis of a lie without acknowledgement or an apology when they are found out, what should we teach our children?
It's a good
And
question.
I want to emphasize that point about Israel. You know, he, in fact, I believe, said that Israeli apartheid was worse than South African apartheid, and he called for a global boycott of Israel. So, you know, when we hear any like American politician praising him, remember that they probably had a hand in trying to make the BDS movement, boycott, divestment, sanctions, illegal.
Yeah.
So, you know, he was very much just a categorical critic of injustice and really for justice.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of like just a obviously a spiritual leader, since he's an archbishop and studied theology, apparently based on like the first priest who actually like shook his mother or father's hand, I believe, but he was a white priest, and it was like the first time a white South African treated his family with respect. And so that made him turn to theology, because he was like, this is greater obviously than race. And I've never, I hadn't had that experience.
Yeah.
Speaking of Israel, he was so much in solidarity and against the occupation of Palestine that he visited East Jerusalem in 2015, as recently as 2015, with former President Jimmy Carter. And here is what he had to say.
That it reminds me so much of what used to happen in South Africa, where people were evicted from their homes and their homes were taken over by whites. And you would see someone say, "You see that house? That used to be my home, but they are no longer allowed to be there." But the point is that happened, and now freedom has come to South Africa, and we want to say to you that justice will prevail in your own situation as it has prevailed in other situations, and that you should not give up hope that you will be able to live securely in your homeland.
Love that dude. Love that dude.
I actually have something I want to bitch about in terms, not about Desmond Tutu, but in terms of how he's understood.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. He won the Nobel Peace Prize, right? But people don't understand the history of South Africa or don't understand who he was. You know, these great spiritual leaders like Gandhi, like Martin Luther King, like Desmond Tutu were also brilliant political strategists. So Desmond Tutu was a leader of the United Democratic Front, which was a nonviolent movement in the 1980s. But it was basically the public face of the ANC.
Right.
And the ANC had a military wing, Spear of the Nation, Umkhonto we Sizwe, that was carrying out guerrilla attacks. They were killing South African military and police. They were blowing up facilities, including oil facilities. There was a war going on. And the thing is, it's never about nonviolence or violence in terms of overthrowing an oppressive regime. It's both. And he was smart enough to understand that he had the moral standing to be the leader of the nonviolent movement, but he was in alliance with the ANC that was leading an armed struggle against this racist fascist state.
Yes, absolutely. And that always gets taken out of, I mean, yeah. And you even mentioned Gandhi, like the people who were working and allied with Gandhi were ready to take violence. I mean, to do violence.
But there was lots of violence.
Yeah.
The Indian National Army, thousands of British were killed. That gets left out of the equation. And, you know, Martin Luther King was kind of clear. He had this loose alliance with Malcolm X, you know, so it's never about one or the other.
Totally.
Yeah. And whenever someone tries to make it a binary choice, oh, well, these people would get their freedom if they would just distance themselves from the violence.
Yes.
Trust that person is upholding the status quo. That's what they're trying to do. through their rhetoric, is just uphold the status quo, blame people for their own oppression by saying, well, if only you would distance yourself from the people doing violence, since you're not. I don't care if you're nonviolent, you will still continue to be oppressed.
If only your resistance to this incredible violence were nonviolent.
Yeah, exactly. If
you
only
would achieve everything.
Yeah, if only you would resist by the specific means laid out to you by your oppressors.
Yeah,
Right.
that'd be great.
Yeah.
If you could just do that. No,
Yeah.
and it's interesting though, because in a lot of the, there's instances where he intervened in, violent action, and that gets held up. And I think that in some way, it's safer characters like Desmond Tutu who allow movements to be massive, right?
Yeah.
And it's not always bad, but it is important, like you're saying, Arun, to not whitewash the militancy that was always there and did in fact help to turn the tide in South Africa. Just one of the struggles that needs to be studied forever and ever and ever by leftists and progressives, and just and is endlessly fascinating. And then my brain was blown when, Naomi Klein's shock doctrine came out, and you realize that the ANC economically was strapped with all these awful free trade deals and kind of, austerity politics. And they got completely, while they're trying to birth a new nation that is a democracy and desegregated, that they're getting hammered by, finance and international capital. So if you guys haven't actually read that book, you have to. It's one of the Naomi Klein's best. Anyway, R.I.P. Desmond Tutu, and thank you for all of your work. And if only we could all be just a little bit like him, that'd be awesome. What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/Bitchuation Room. Do it.